Welcome to Crypto Disrupted, a cryptocurrency and blockchain podcast with your hosts, Trent Lipinski and Greg Kerr.
Welcome to Crypto Disrupted. I'm Trent Lipinski, and this is my co-host below me, Greg Kerr. And with us today, we've got Grace Rahmani and Marco Howen of the DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization Leadership Program, and you guys have also written a book. Grace, can you kind of tell us who you are and what you're working on?
Okay, wow, that would take a long time. I'm 50 already. But we've been working on the area of leadership of decentralized organizations, of DAOs, and the book is a handbook. It has exercises and stuff like that, but we don't expect people to actually do exercises in the book, so we thought we better do some training as well. And I also founded ICOWhitepapers.com. I write ICOWhitepapers.com, so I'm very deep into what's going to happen in 6 or 12 months because people come to me first, right? So, and I got really involved in this and interested in this because I was looking at how, actually I'm Israeli, and I was looking at the Arab Spring and I was like, wow, these people are so unlikely to choose the concurrent formation of democracy. We better figure out something better. And that was before I knew what blockchain was. But I started thinking, how should humans organize themselves? And what are the skills that we're going to start to need as human beings in order to lead ourselves that way? And so actually that started a long time before even I knew what a Bitcoin was. So that's how we got into this.
Yeah, so maybe about me, I'm Marco Howen. I am into DAO leadership because I'm passionate about human excellence. I'm passionate about how things, how people can evolve and how people can take responsibility for themselves. So DAO leadership was also something I was thinking about. How can companies or people in companies just be more efficient and run more efficiently? And thought about writing a book since a long time, but didn't really had a way how to do that. And there was this woman I met called Grace Rahmani who said, hey, I told her, let's write a book. And she said, I don't want to. And then we got into the whole crypto scene and we discussed it. And we saw that there is an incredible need in the whole distributed autonomous or decentralized autonomous organization space of companies who are raising a shitload of money right now, but they have no clue how to spend it. Well, besides buying Bentleys, but if they really want to run, their DAO, their project, they want to bring it forward, they have no clue how to do that. And we thought, hey, let's write a book about that.
And not ironically, we met at a Tony Robbins seminar.
Yeah. Both serving, so we are both crazy enough to take.
We're junkies. We're self-help junkies. I mean, and if you read the book, you'll see that we bring in a lot of disciplines because we're both junkies, and so we both have studied a lot of these different leadership training seminars. I've got an MBA. We're totally overeducated. So what do you do if you're overeducated? You write a book.
No, that's interesting. No, and that's a great life marker too that you've accomplished in writing a book. It's something I haven't done. We have somebody in our triad. She just got published last week on a book about the future, right? And I was like, who writes about the future? Don't they call those prophets? Do we have a prophet? And speaking of prophets, this is kind of hitting me. We're the second ones on our show talking about decentralized autonomous organizations, and both of those are coming out of Israel. And so as you're talking about this, I'm like, oh, this is the culture that brought us also the 10 Commandments, right? You've already been interested. This culture's been interested in giving guidelines on how people should live and get along in a community. Because, the first 3 commandments are about kind of reverence to a maker. And then the rest of them are how we treat each other. That's what the 10 Commandments are. And so it's interesting that now we're getting this digitized algorithmic commandments, that helps people, operate in a fair manner, right? It creates those trustless environments. And I think I said this in the one with the other DAO podcast, but something that ISIS is proving is that bad rules are better than no rules. And if you want to counter that type of ideology, you need to send in more rules. And these types of systems, these DAOs or apps that have kind of like commerce-based applications, those right there are rules that can counter some extremist rules, right? Like you're offering governing systems to groups, and that's needed to deconflict conflict, not just as much as it is to make, a company a lot more efficient. So,
it's interesting that you start with the 10 Commandments. And Matan, of course, when Matan and I speak, we don't speak English, right? But the 10 Commandments are mentioned twice in the Bible. And once it's just the short version, which is the version most people know. And then there's another place in the Bible where they're repeated, and they're a longer version. And the Old Testament is built around those rules. So you've got the short version of the rules, the long version of the rules. Then you've got, and we say that there's 613 instructions in the Old Testament, right? And all the 5 books of Moses. Then you've got the prophets. And that's an additional kind of narration around those rules. And then for the last few hundred years, few thousand years, we've been having this oral law, right? There's an oral law that comes around it. And then there's that got written down. So now there's a written version of the oral law. And we still have these groups that discuss that. So that the laws aren't enough. And that's really what Marco and I said. It's like, look, the people writing the laws are going to create laws that reflect who they are. And if we in humanity is right now, we live in a competitive environment, right? Not the post-competitive environment. We live in a competitive environment. We breathe competitive environment. We act and communicate as if it's a competition. What kind of AI are we going to create?
Competitive AI.
Right?
Hey, that's a good point.
Right? And so we all have this idea the AI is going to rule the world, but we also thought that about Facebook. Like, do you remember, I don't know, you guys are a little young, but you remember it was like, there's going to be this Google and we're going to be able to communicate with anybody. And it's going to be like, we're going to see so many different opinions and, Jews will be able to talk to Arabs and everything. And what we got was filter bubble.
Yeah. We got a bunch of echo chambers where they've actually just segregated everyone. It's like, I mean, this is kind of the Nazis' like ultimate ideal of putting everyone in a box and not letting anyone talk to each other.
Yeah.
We got kind of basically. I mean, this is kind of it's this weird like capitalistic fascist system hybrid with like echo chambers where nobody, you only see the things that you like because that's what's profitable. They don't want you to leave the platform. So Facebook and Google realized early on that, if you search for something and you find a result you don't like, or you see something on your Facebook newsfeed that you don't like, then you're going to leave the platform. You're going to have a negative reaction and you're going to associate that with their brand. So they started saying, hey, let's only show you things that give you that dopamine rush. And then they just started, optimizing these apps and optimizing these platforms to give you what you want, even if what you want is the wrong answer. And they don't care if it's the wrong answer. They don't care if it's fake news or not the truth. They only care about giving you that dopamine rush. I was just talking to someone the other day, and I was explaining to him that the biggest drug dealers on the planet is Silicon Valley, because they're pushing that dopamine button every time, you get a like on one of your posts. Every time, you get that notification, every time you get that text message, we have these chemical receptors in our brain that are being triggered every time one of these things happen, and we're being rewarded for the wrong behaviors.
Now, on the adverse of that, if you think about a lot of societies are on different paths of the journey, right? And we mentioned the Arab Spring, and the Arab Spring is the adverse of that, where there was a breakdown in these pillars of information. There was horizontal sharing, and holy crap, it was powerful because it went across North Africa and it's still manifesting in Syria. And it changed, the face of the Middle East much more than the 67 to 73 wars, altogether. We're witnessing this big shift in rules. And like you said, what comes out of it? And we saw Mubarak fall. And then there was kind of a tantrum by the people, and then Morrissey fell, and now they're kind of back into a new thing. So yeah, so I agree that rule setting has been an issue, and different societies once are along a different path. What allowed you?
The question is also the problem right now is, where are we going? You know, because as human beings, we do this thing. It's like, this sucks. I'm gonna find a girlfriend, and then this sucks. I'm gonna get married, and then this sucks. I'm gonna have children, and then this sucks, and I'm gonna get a divorce, right? And we don't even like know what we're going towards, right? And so it's like the Arab Spring is really symptomatic of that. That's why we're talking about what would a decentralized autonomous organization leadership look like, and how would it run itself? Because otherwise, you're throwing out what you had, but you don't even know, like, where am I going next?
Mm-hmm. Can you go into more detail? Like, explain. So kind of for someone who doesn't know what a decentralized autonomous organization is, can we define that and kind of start at the beginning and then work through like what is required in the leadership steps? Like, how do you become a leader within a decentralized autonomous organization?
I can take this one. Maybe take a step back and look into how the world was run like 150 years ago, and why did we have hierarchies, and why hierarchies were important. This was because it was just not possible differently. If you wanted to bring your message out, if you were the boss of a company, you had to take physically a piece of paper or give a piece of paper to somebody who went to somebody who did the same, and so on. So you needed this pyramid of hierarchy in order to make it happen. Now, what happened in the last 20, 25 years is that all this, and there's this book from, I don't get the name now, but this The World is Flat book, where all this different layers getting flat, and today we can communicate very easily with each other now. We are the proof now. We are distributing, communicating. So we're sitting in 4 different time zones right now. So it's quite crazy. And we can do that, and it's costing not a buck. Well, that's 150 euros to have the Zoom running. But all in all, that's what that's what the thing costs. So it's totally simple. And coming back to what you said, Greg, it's like on top of that, today we have a totally flat way of how we can execute, because with the smart contracts, with the way we're setting up the way how we can really run the governance, we can automate that. That's great. Now we have all that, but the problem is now, and that's Matan talking about. Matan talks about how can we organize this? Well, how can we make this framework working? And that's very, very important. But then we need the mindset in order to make that happen. We need the management and the communication tools to make that happen. That's where we're coming from. So a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, are the people who are on top of this organization, who are sitting everywhere in the world, who are working towards one goal, towards one, can be blockchain for good, can be whatever, and they want to strive towards an outcome, but they are not making it happen because they have not the tool to do so, because nobody taught them to take the responsibility, because we're all coming out of a centralized way of seeing things. We all come out of the way where a boss have to tell us what we do, and even so he is not. We have I'm a shareholder. I'm an entrepreneur since 20 years. But I always have a board. Even so, I'm the main shareholder of my company. Sometimes I'm the one who runs to a board, and I talk to them. So it's like you always have somebody who is really on top and who's really giving you. So we are coming from that world. Now, what we are seeing now is we see this totally distributed. I like the term distributed, so decentralized, which is more used in the industry. The decentralized organization, and what we need is this kind of a leadership. We need to know how to take on responsibility, how to treat, and I will let Grace take over on that one. We're really talking about the tools we are developing.
Yeah. And so your question about how do you become a leader of a decentralized organization or a distributed organization is a very interesting question, right? Because when you have a hierarchy, then you know what it is. And I don't know if you've ever, I'm sure you have seen people at Consensus, they don't have job titles that make any sense of what they're the boss of. They just kind of have something that they have to make happen, right? And if you think about a salesperson has always been autonomous. And if you make X amount of sales, you get a percentage. And you don't worry about what the boss told you. Like, and if he told you something stupid, you don't do it because you eat what you hunted down. And so we've already been like that for a long time. And certainly the younger generation, right? Your generation doesn't really, it's really hard to tell them what to do. And open source is actually a very good example of that, right? There's a goal and there's bounty programs and there's a way for those organizations to kind of organically decide what codes it goes in. And that was pretty cool if it's, Apache server. But if it's money and somebody decides to fork, that's like, that's like Catalonia, right? That's not democracy. They're like, if you don't like it, fork off. I'm like, yeah, fork off, fork you. It doesn't work when you're talking about millions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So the way that you become a leader is you already are. Because if you're at any location in that organization, you have responsibility and accountability for what's going to happen to that organization. And that might just be deciding what code gets accepted. I was actually reading the Starfish and the Spider, right, talks about this. And they were talking about Wikipedia, right? There's people whose entire job is to just clean up the trolls. And they're quite happy to do that for free. That's a declaration. We call that a declaration of leadership. And this is really the foundation. A declaration of leadership is any time you say, this is going to happen if it wasn't inevitable, right? And that could be, I'm going to run a marathon. That's a pretty small declaration of leadership. Or it can be, we're going to reduce carbon emissions globally. That's a pretty big declaration of leadership. And the moment you declare it, it's like there's a gap. There's a gap between where I am and where I want to go. And there's a gap in what I'm capable of doing, right? So Marco declared he was going to write a book in English.
Yeah, which is not my mother tongue, as you already found out.
Right? And then he meets me and I'm like, he said I didn't want to write it. And I'm like, I've written 100 books. I don't have my name on the book. I've run writing companies. I mean, I've written, 500,000 pages in my life, right? And I'm like, I'm not writing a book. That is not an exciting challenge for me.
And she didn't need me yet.
Right? But I needed his partnership, right, in order to encourage me to have these discussions. What is leadership? How do you create leadership? But being a leader of anything is now a declaration. And there's always going to be impact of whether you declare. You can say, well, I'm not really responsible for the school systems. And you know what? I don't even have any children in the school system. But then if there's high unemployment because everybody has a bad education, you still get the impact.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you don't have to declare leadership and you don't have to declare responsibility. You're like, what can I do? I travel a lot. I eat, I don't kind of exercise, whatever. You're going to get the impact of that, whether or not you declare but you get to declare what you care about. And that's one of the things that I really think about a lot. And I think Matan also and the Holochain guys like Matt was talking about that, was each community declares their leadership around what it is they care about. And this idea that we're going to send our best guy to Washington, London, Luxembourg, Paris, whatever it is, Brussels, and he's going to represent us on every issue, even things he doesn't really care about, is over. Instead, you're going to see people organizing into communities of caring where they declare their leadership in an area they care about, and they kind of self-tax maybe, right? They're kind of like, we want to build a bridge and we're going to all put in 10 units of money. I'm just going to call them units of money because who knows what that's going to look like, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to put in 10 units of money, and every time somebody crosses, we're going to charge 1/10 of a unit of money, and over X amount of time, we're going to get our money back. And that's how we're going to build the bridge, right? And so these units of caring or units of concern or whatever you want to call this will start to evolve. And they may have their own forms of currency, and they may use some sort of generally accepted form of currency. But that kind of thing is how we see this evolving. But again, you need fundamentally, first of all, that mindset, right? You got to stop grumbling about the government and be it.
So a meritocracy, and I think, and you're exposing my very, very loose use of that term, right? Like, oh, this needs to be a meritocracy, meaning like the best ideas rise. But you're showing the math behind that. you can say, okay, yeah, no, you can have this idea of a meritocracy, but here's the math and the code that promote and create the meritocracy, right? That allow people or these communities of interest, as you were describing, to set forth an intention, and then everybody can kind of build the math behind attaining that attention, right? And I like this because it also answers that question that everybody complains about: how are millennials going to work? Because they can't, stay on task. You're like, no, they're going to have computer-aided rules, and they're going to be the most productive generation.
Greg, I want to jump in there because that's exactly one of the reasons why we talked about the book. Is either we continue to bitch about how bad. Oh, sorry, I'm using words I don't have the right to do that. And when I talk to US guys, so sorry. But
his English isn't that good. That's why.
We'll mark this as explicit.
Blame it on my accent.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is the words he sees in the movies most commonly. That's what he uses.
What I want to say is we can continue and moan about how the millennials are unproductive and how they are a bad generation and how it will not work going forward in companies. Or we can say, well, we find a way how to make them effective. And the fact is today that, as you said, they're not on task. They are not accepting. They're not accepting hierarchy anymore. They're not accepting as much as we did. They're not accepting so much anymore that somebody tells them what to do. They are. If you take Maslow's pyramid, they are on the why scale. They're not on how can I survive. They don't have to think about that. They're on the why. So, in order to do that, well, we have to find ways how to organize them. And that's where, well, we have today this technology, which DAO Stack or Aragon develops, but well, we need more. That's what we are talking about.
Yeah, there's
the idea of productivity is kind of weird, though.
How so?
Well, once upon a time, we lived in communities, and they were decentralized, autonomous organizations, and everybody had a little farm and whatever. And if you had too many free riders, somebody starved. Right? If you had, maybe, because you got the village idiot and you got a few people that you got to support and old folks. But if more than 20% of the people are free riders, the society crumbles.
Bureaucrats.
Right? Well, but now we have the opposite. And we're trying to make people productive. But actually what productive means is creating more environmental damage. Because if 20% of the people today work, we have enough food, shelter, and clothing for everybody. So somebody sitting on their butt playing the ukulele under a banana tree who's happy doesn't have to be productive if we have enough food for them. So, people talk about universal minimum income, but our entire economy is designed such that you have to work in order to eat and consume, and that's not actually beneficial anymore to our ecosystem as a whole, right? I mean, even if you think about a lion, right? A lion hunts a couple times a week, and most of the time he lies around. He doesn't need to be productive the rest of the time in order to eat. It's just silly. And so we've created this thing, and that's why we have poverty, is because there isn't a need for those people to work, so that fundamentally as a contribution to society, their net value to society is almost zero, because we don't need that work done. And then we keep trying to create an economy which is upside down. So this is one of the problems that, again, we see the future of governance looking at this problem and saying, how do we as a humanity, right, solve this like an ecosystem?
And you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, if you go down that road, you really see that we need the shift that not everybody is the productivity we are looking for is always pushed upon. So the whole organization was done so in a way that we all are on a to-do list and we are not on a to-be list. So we have to think about how we organize, and what will happen is with technology, with blockchain, with AI, with robotics, we will not have, that's not the theme of today, but I think it's very important to say, we will not have enough work anymore for everybody. The next wave of people going out of business are lawyers, because we don't need them anymore, because an algorithm can way easier give us the information we need on the simple tasks out of a database than somebody who takes a book and looks for it. So it makes no sense. So we are not on the way where there will be more work over the next 50 years. There will be less work done by humans, and that are real societal challenges we have to tackle. Nevertheless, we have to find a way how we can be and not only do.
I got an idea. And this is where it comes down to this access to value, right?
So exciting. Yeah.
and yeah, you're right, because there is a less demand in labor, but people still need access to value. And so the proof Bitcoin made is you can assign value to anything, in that case, digital labor or an algorithm. And now we can digitally represent value in other things. So under Trent and I, we're creating a system where, you use the bathroom, you can create value because you're using a toilet, and the value is to not use a toilet. People always sometimes call our system a poop coin. And I'm like, well, the other side of that is a don't poop outside coin.
Right.
Because that's where the value is to have a cleaner environment and properly maintain your waste. So I can see where you're going down and saying, okay, look, we see this like trend where there's going to be less need for labor, which means you're going to have more of a class of people that don't need to work to survive. And how do you remedy that? Well, then you need to break down a lot of barriers to access to value. And if it's using the bathroom, recycling, owning your own data, all these different things, or participating in a community of interest that create value and perform those tasks, that's how you're going to have not this like just masses of welfare. Is where I see it,
but again, you're calling it welfare like as if that because you're an American and you think that's a dirty term. Like,
and because I've been writing about it,
and helping, creating a better society where everybody has enough to eat and healthcare. That's not dirty.
Yeah, and as a political word in my context, right? You're absolutely correct. I've just been writing a lot about a universal basic income, and it's like, hey, it's not going to be welfare. It's going to be reducing all the barriers between humans and value creation. Because so that's where I'm stuck in that paradigm. You're right. Yeah.
Because you can be creative and sit under a banana tree and play your ukulele, which could be quite valuable to the people walking by the banana tree if you're not worried about your income all the time. You can be creative and think of a solution for how to, clean up the litter in your town when you're not so dead tired at the end of the day because you had to work to make a living. You can create value. So, but the other place that this is leading when you talk about it is one of the things that has been really missing, and we talk about this in the book, and we're not sure how it's going to work because it's been missing from the Aragons and colonies and DAO stacks, is one of the things you want to reward is functionality like an ecosystem, which would be, rather than voting, figure out a collaborative solution. So if you think about it, the four of us could have 4 proposals on the table, one of each of us, and we could put it out there to our, people, and they could vote on it. Or we could say, Marco's kind of overlaps Greg's by X%. Let's look at that. And you know what? That part of it, and we need to also start creating systems that reward collaboration and punish assiness. So like if you could look at a whole bunch of proposals and there was one stubborn ass, right? And that person had a really similar proposal, but they didn't collaborate, you could punish them with coin, right? Like, or by taking away their privileges or taking away their merit. And by the way, reputation is very different than, than currency. And a lot of times we're tokenizing these things in a way that makes reputation and currency seem similar, but they're very different. But
tell me how, because I do that. You just you're exposing all kinds of things to me.
So if you think about yourself, you have a certain amount of money in the bank. Now, maybe you inherited that money, maybe you earned that money, maybe you were a very good investor, and maybe you saved every penny that you've ever made, right? And you just have a really easygoing lifestyle. Now, you have a certain amount of money that you earned, which represents the amount of money people were willing to pay you over your lifetime. And there's not a whole lot of correlation between your, let's call it reputation, which is how much people were willing to pay for your services, and what's in your bank account right now.
That's a good point. Okay, so the earned stuff is based on your reputation, your skills. Your inherited or your usury money is a lot of external factors that gave you value. So
yeah, but wait, it's bigger than that now. Okay. Because the amount of money in your bank account, if you earned the same as I did, now there's a reputation that you should have as somebody who's been a good investor or a bad investor. Now that's a totally different reputation than the reputation of how much you earned as a programmer, YouTuber, or whatever else. So reputation isn't one-dimensional.
It's contextual.
It's a matrix. You have a ranking, let's say 1 to 10 is the ranking, doesn't matter what it is, on every skill that you've got, right? So I have a ranking on writing, and you can read my book and you can find out what that is. Now you can, right? And we talk about that in the book, and I said, and then I have a ranking on being a good parent. And of course, I've got twice as much reputation because I have 2 children and Mark only has 1.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right?
Already in jail. I guess that's the
right. But and then exactly. So you have reputation on different elements. So reputation is actually matrix.
Okay. Yeah.
It's
now I
not
see it.
a one-dimensional number like how many tokens I've got, or even my lifetime earnings of tokens doesn't represent my reputation. It only represents my reputation in a very, very specific domain.
Actually, you talked about meritocracy and idea meritocracy before. It's like I'm very passionate about that because, well, most likely we read the same books about from Ray Dalio and Principles, and what Ray Dalio talks about is that, well, he is rating everybody is rated in his apps, and everybody has scorecards and so on. So to create this reputation, because the biggest challenge in idea meritocracies is, how do I know that, or if I take decisions, and how do I know that this guy has the reputation and his decision will be rated higher than the decision of somebody who has less merit? How do I know that? And that's where the big challenge is coming in. If we go into more complex systems than an investment company, as Ray Dalio is doing it, because that it works. He does that since 40 years, and he's quite successful. He's one of the top 100 richest people in the world. So it looks like he just does something right. But how do you make that happen on a societal level? That's where the challenge comes in. Who decides who has, if you take the river, who decides who has enough a river, and you have to decide about pollution in the river? Who decides that who is taking the samples has the enough reputation in order to analyze it? So you have to find a way who does that. So that's cannot be centralized, because it would be centralized, then it is an autocracy right away, because it's right away one person still who gives the voucher to somebody else to take the merit on. So it's a very complex situation, which we are not solving in the book for sure.
But it's interesting that you said meritocracy when I was actually talking about a keratocracy.
Oh, okay.
I was talking about if you care about it, you will be on the council, and if you don't care about it, you don't care if you have staking tokens in that, because you don't care about it. And that's the other conflict, because you do want a meritocracy, because you do want or meritocratic type decisions about cleaning the river, because which of these methodologies will clean the river the fastest is really important, right? But if you live by the river, you have more stake than if you're an expert living on another continent. So staking is also part of decision-making process, but it's not, you could be really stupid, but you're a fisherman and you live there and that's your whole living.
Yeah, and that's where I was in Baghdad around 2009, 2010, and we were handing all the Iraqi prisoners back to the Iraqi government. So I was leading this task of going through every single detainee to do kind of a threat assessment on each one. And I was like, Al-Qaeda in Iraq was the only meritocracy I could find in Iraq. Like the U.S. military is far from it. The Iraqi government was far from it, but then I just started seeing Sunnis that were literally fighting for their survival and their political representation. And that desperation created a meritocracy where the true leaders in the community started rising. And I remember once helping a detainee, yeah, so you started seeing people see like, hey, they're in a tough situation and they're trying to like survive their way out, and what skills are being demonstrated that help people rise. And every time I go to Iraq and Afghanistan, I would read and study about the American Revolution so I could see these leaders in a light that I was culturally conditioned to accept. And so then I started seeing, you know, George Washington, Nathaniel Greene, all these leaders that I liked as, you know, insurgent leaders, and what made them grow in that meritocracy, which allowed me to help see these guys in Iraq as like meritorious leaders and what's making them grow. And so that's where I was kind of formed in it, to kind of start to see, okay, yeah, like how do people rise to the top? Ebola was another one where, you know, you just started seeing people and skills rising that were suppressed under a centralized system. But then when everybody was dying, you know, things got elevated to more of a merit sake. But you guys look like you can do this without creating the conditions of death as the impetus or the genesis of making sure.
Hopefully.
I wish that were true, but if you look at where we're going, it is.
How so?
Well, I don't know if you've noticed about global warming and warfare and hunger. It is an impetus of death, just most of those of us, you know, all us white people on this call, right? It's not our death. We'll be the last ones. We'll move to a mountain. We'll move away from the coast. We'll do whatever we have to do. But, you know, not having air to breathe is kind of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, but in the book focuses more on the human skills, because between you and me, like those other people that you've interviewed here who are actually programming it, I think they're going to deal with the technical side a lot better than I will. But we're really dealing with the human side. Who do you have to be in that place? How do you have to communicate in that place in order to reach these goals? Because right now, it's going to be a while before the AI does this for us. And in the meanwhile, we are, as a community, right? As a community, as the blockchain community, to some degree, we're under threat. Or we are the threat. Depends on where you're sitting.
Good point.
And if we're not showing ourselves to be the next evolution and the next generation of what leadership can be, if we're just animal farm out here, then who the heck is going to listen to us? You know, if we start creating these systems that are ostensibly decentralized, I mean, it's really,
Grace,
we don't talk about it.
Can you kind of like go into so like in the book, you go into authenticity, you go into honesty, radical honesty, you know, like some of the discomfort of honesty. And can you kind of go into that and explain that for people? Because I think that's where you were kind of going with this. Am I right?
Well, yeah. Well, the least comfortable thing is that we're all kind of jerks.
We're selfish.
Well, some people, their special jerkiness is selfishness. And some people, their special jerkiness is pleasing other people, right? Those would be the opposite types of jerkiness. Now, the person who's selfish, at least you know what he wants. The person who's pleasing, you never know what his opinion really is. So we all have a special built-in and a jerkiness. And until we can really see that we're a jerk, and the special way that we're in a jerk, you can't really compliment it, because the thing about your jerkiness, everybody knows it about you, and you're spending all your time trying to cover it up.
Oh, yeah. I was
Right?
thinking, all my ex-partners have the same feedback, literally verbatim. And then I went, oh, I am the problem. And life has been so much easier since then.
As soon as you say that, that's a declaration of leadership, by the way. That's saying, I am the problem. Whatever's happening here, I made it happen.
Yeah. Okay, owning the responsibility. Yeah. Like partners don't, like, if you look at my background, all the war, the conflict, the Ebola, all that stuff, I went there, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not a good partner.
Yeah, I had just this week. I was talking to where I was doing sort of a little mastermind with some of my Tony friends, and one of the women was like, you know, I'm dating this guy, and you know, he's not one of the Tony people, so he doesn't get up in the morning. He doesn't have a morning routine. So I said to him, we should do this and we should do that, and he goes, yeah, we'll do that. And then I found out he's not doing it. She goes, why did he tell me he's going to do it when he wasn't going to? I'm like, well, that's a good question to ask. Why did he tell you yes when he meant no? And she was like, oh.
Yeah, well, and in a
Right?
dating situation, he's just putting it. He's aligning, right? Maybe.
He loves you and he wants to make you happy, and so he says, yes, honey, right? But if we always ask ourselves, why is somebody lying to us, right? You're saying radical honesty. If we consider ourselves, I'm the problem. If he's lying, I'm the problem. He couldn't be honest with me.
Yeah, you didn't have the conditions within your relationship for him to feel comfortable to tell the truth.
Yeah. Maybe you
That's
yell
the
every
only
day.
way to look at it.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're just going to be frustrated and call people liars all your life. Yeah.
And we all lie, right?
Of course.
Yeah. The biggest lie is that we're not liars.
I had an angel investor last week go, "Can you lie?" And I went, "Yes," and it shocked her. She was looking for.
I love it. It's like she never does.
Oh, yeah. And then she went through this idea. She said she had gotten this real existential area regarding her family and her kids, so she had to lie for that. And I was like, man, that's a wrong time to learn to lie when your kids are online. You better figure out how to do it.
Kids have a radar.
Yeah.
But it's true, and you can see what that generated, right? You immediately generated intimacy with her by saying yes. You immediately made it safe for her to be able to say something about lying. You immediately created a transparency that isn't normal in an investor conversation, right? Now, if you think about decentralized, you think about brutal honesty, right? And if you think about a decentralized organization, again, like Matt was talking about from Holochain, right? It's an ecosystem. So can you imagine your body's like an ecosystem? And if you could imagine a situation in which there wasn't brutal honesty in your body. So for example, if your toe hurt, if your brain didn't know it. So you don't have to imagine that, because that happens to diabetics. And if you look online, you'll see some very gruesome picture of what happens when you don't have total honesty in your body. And your brain doesn't know that your toe hurts. You get gangrene.
Dang, man, yeah. I've been reflecting. I haven't been to the doctor in a minute.
and if you have a company, right? And Guy Kawasaki has this wonderful thing about how, in his book on competition, about how the management hears about something that's bad, right? And so, like, it starts with it's shit and it sucks, and then the person says it's excrement and it has a very strong smell. Right. And by the time it gets up to the management level, it sounds like it's a flower. It smells very, you can smell it in the whole room. And, it's like, and that's what happens in a hierarchical organization. And the damage in a hierarchical organization is the same, right? The CEO doesn't know that the product bites. And if you're looking at an organization and we say, we're going to create, self-sovereign identity, but the people doing this API don't know what those guys over there are doing, and we're all sitting in different places in the world, and we're not telling each other, and we're not communicating to each other, is not going to work. And one of the real needs for brutal honesty also comes from cultural perspective, because Americans say things like, it's interesting. Now, when an American says it's interesting, it does not mean that it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So it also has to do with brutal on being really simple in your communication, because when you're talking to somebody in another culture, they understood something different.
Yeah, you need a cultural interpretation, not just a literal interpretation.
And we have a lot of tools for that. We have Slack channels, and we have Telegram channels, and we've started to have ways to collect a lot of that information in a very transparent way. And we haven't done a great job yet of sorting it, but that'll come. And then and then you can create ways of knowing who's participating. So you can have a score of this guy, man, he shares everything. Like, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. I mean, hopefully he shares everything that's useful. And this person writes really comprehensive reports, and more people read his reports and respond to his reports than other people's reports. So he might have a score of how much code he writes and how good his code is and how much his code comes back from QA. But he also might have a score of how many of his ideas were accepted, even if he's a crappy coder, but he has a lot of attention to his ideas. And you can measure that now on, whatever it is, Slack or Telegram or email or whatever. We have a measurement of how much responsiveness he's getting, how much people are following his or her ideas. And all those things can be, again, we don't really, Marco and I aren't the programmers, but we love to talk about these ideas and lead people into looking at their own what are their own assumptions and how are they measuring that in their organizations, so that they can.
GitHub's a really good example of that. GitHub is where, developers are submitting their code publicly or sometimes privately into different repositories, and then you can go review it. So when I was running my last startup, GitHub, it basically removed having to have conversations with my developers, because I could just go into the GitHub account, I could look at the code they submitted, I could see, okay, they did what they said they were going to do, okay, that bug is fixed. I could see all those different changes happening within the software. I could see, oh, someone submitted a bug report, they fixed it. I didn't have to have a conversation with the developer about that anymore. And I could see results happening without having to have all those conversations. And I could see, okay, this developer is replying to all the bug reports. This developer is building new features. And then I knew where to assign them. So when when there was a certain problem, it's like, okay, here's a bug. I'm going to go to the guy who's been solving all the bugs for the last 6 months. If I've got a foundational, coding, software, structural architecture issue, I'm going to go to the person who's been working on the architecture and the foundation of the code, not the guy who just fixes bugs. So you get a transparency of what everyone in your system is doing by being able to see all of that data. So GitHub is a perfect example of, kind of a software tool that, is a step in that direction. And it's just a matter of time before, we can start to develop tools to do that for project management. And, there already is Basecamp and Asana and, project management.
What about Uber? Like Uber's value system, it's not like they're having end of the year like every Uber employee doesn't get in front of a manager and get critiqued. They're critiqued constantly through the system.
Uber, the drivers.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, there's also, there's problems with that. And actually, what's his name? Doc Searles has an article about that. About this horrible Uber ride where he was on this horrible, but the guy got lost, didn't have gas, didn't have money for the tolls. This whole thing happened to him. But in this 40-minute ride that should have taken 10 minutes, right? And Doc Searles is one of the people in our industry, right? And he got to learn about this guy's life, and then he gave him a 4-star rating, not 5, but because he felt bad, right?
Yeah.
But so that's one missing, right? When we rate each other, there's kind of well, I like that person and I feel bad, and it is their living. I gave a bad rating on hotels.com recently because the place was not good, but all the ratings were good when I went there, because people felt, because the guy who was running it, I mean, he really was a lovely guy, and he came and he served you your breakfast in the morning, and you felt bad, right? But it was a crappy place.
I've often said that too, because when I've done this weird conversations where you show everybody your Uber rating, right? And all the guys in the group had higher ratings than the women. And I always figure that I get into a cab and I don't have to worry about the guy hitting, the Uber driver never wants to sleep with me. So I never have to defend against that. So women always have to calculate that, and they get in, they can be a little bit more cold, or they're more cold. And I think that reflects into their Uber rating, where I'm really personable whenever you're Uber, because there's no sexual threat there for me normally.
Yeah, that's right. Women go around being threatened. And then there's the other aspect of that is, again, you were talking about work. And this is really important, right? This is really important to our industry specifically, right? And I'm calling it industry, but it's not industry. I mean, we're giving value to things that people never gave value to before. And we know that as humanity and as a global environment, we're paying the price of giving value to only a very few things. And so when you talk about project management and GitHub and whatever, all these tools are measuring money, right? Productivity. Now, if we want to measure honesty, that's really different.
Actually, Trent, I want to maybe jump into that, because what you said is great, because when you are in this logic of having everybody being on GitHub and seeing all these results, and seeing how things are unfolding nicely, that's great. But what you most likely did before, and that's what we were talking about in the book, is you did an alignment. You aligned everybody on what has to be done. So there was an interaction. Otherwise, or maybe there was not, but then tell us. But I believe that there was an interaction, which was an interaction towards an alignment on what has to be produced, who takes on what, and so on. And they're most likely where people say, well, I am the one who is the bug fixer because that's what I like to do, and I am that. So there were all this kind of logics of declaration of leadership and alignment.
So what is it going to look like? Like, what do you think a company, what do you know, in 5 years, because in my head, because you're getting into this, you're right. Everything we've ever done is aligned toward this like petrodollar, you know, backed by gold or oil or whatever. Right. Now we're going to be able to have these new systems where the value is coming from other places. So naturally things are going to shift in ways that I can't comprehend, but maybe like, how do you see it?
Well, we have these data devices that know everything about us. They know how early we show up for flights. They know how often we miss a flight. They know how often we see the text but are like, and they know like our honesty score. They know our reliability score. They know our preference score. They know how great our decisions are, right? They know a lot of things about us. So we're going to have this kind of system that's going to know who probably, like, unlike, they won't have to have Trent look at the bug report. It'll say, hey, you're looking to find somebody who's going to reliably show up for this, this, and this, who people respond to well, who their ideas are accepted, and who usually has long-term, you know, if you look at their decisions 5 years later on the impact on the environment, they've usually made a good decision which has good 5-year outcomes. Oh, that's Marco. And so you'll be going around with this identity wallet, which you can share whatever you want, but the system will kind of know. And if you declare leadership in this area, right, it's like, I'm going to clean up the river. We keep talking about the river because it's a clear area where until now we haven't given monetary value, but we all understand what it means to drink clean water and have fish, right? You know, and we've given the opposite value. Like if you pollute the water, then you're still making money with your chemical plant, right? So we know that that's backwards. And so we'll all be walking around with our reputations in all these different dimensions, and you'll be able to know if somebody's an honest worker or not. So if you say my company values are transparency, honesty, whatever, you'll know somebody is or isn't that, and you can reward somebody for being or not being that. And, you know, those things will be known in a variety of configurations.
No, that's great because one of the things I've been thinking about, you know, getting people to participate in our system is let's go to Stanford and then just get them to put on their application, how much renew do you have? Like they don't have to judge on that, but now that the idea is that you can measure your relationship to your waste and to renewable energy, why shouldn't an institution like Harvard or Stanford say, hey, you had an opportunity to measure your waste recycling. What did you do with that? You know, and then explain yourself why you have no Renew coin. Or, you know, and then I guess it kind of speaks for itself if you've produced a lot of Renew coin, you know. But yeah, so that helped me just kind of see this new idea of reputation where everything we do is going to be measured, hence it can be diagnostic. So whether it's something that I consider my job or my hobby, or some other relationship thing I do, even drinking beer, you know, because once again, you know, how much beer you drink is going to be regulated, you know, by how many times you go to the pub and all this other stuff. So you'll quickly find out, you know, all the aspects of my life because it's all measurable. And then it could probably flash up almost like a stock graph. You can start looking at people's behavior based on these like stock market looking graphs and quickly kind of like, oh, this guy does this, that, the other. Yeah,
and the Renew thing really, you know, like, even knowing how much time, like you don't know, but how much time I stood right in front of the place where you throw out your garbage, right? Like when you go to a restaurant, there's like bottles, whatever. How much time I paused there will indicate whether I took the time to separate my trash. And your phone knows that.
With the Internet of Things, and then
Google knows how long I stood there. Come on, Google knows. Have you ever had this stupid thing? Like you go somewhere and Google says there's a suspicious login, and you're like, Google, you have my plane ticket, you have my schedule, you have the Google map which showed me going there, and that, like, if I logged in from home, that would be suspicious.
Yeah.
Google knows how long you stood in front of that trash can. Google probably knows how far out of your way. Like if I'm walking down the street, right, and I go like that, it's because there's a recycle bin over there.
And it can make predictions that, oh, it's a recycling.
This person recycles. And not only that, but she carried that bottle freaking 5 blocks. I mean, she really cares. And there were 5 garbage cans that she passed, and she didn't go to them. 5 blocks, she's been walking straight. She got the drink over there. She walked 5, I mean, it didn't take her 5 blocks to drink that whole drink. Right? And she waited till she found a garbage can that had a recycle bin. You really know something about somebody just from their Google path.
See, and the sad thing is that data is available right now. That data exists today, but there's no financial incentive to do anything with it, so they don't. So it just sits there in a vault, and they don't do anything with that data. That data has tremendous value to the world, but it's completely lost because it doesn't make them money.
Exactly.
So, you know, that's the crime that centralization has, you know, perpetrated against humanity, is that we've optimized all of our systems for this profit, for this, you know, this US dollar, a number on a computer screen. It's not even real anymore. It doesn't reflect anything. You know, we still kind of refer to it as the petrodollar, but it's not even the petrodollar anymore. It's really just a number on a screen. That's it. It has no other meaning or value.
And it's worse than that. It hasn't made us happy. The happiness factor, right, has gone down. The number of antidepressants and suicides and it hasn't made us happy. We're really measuring the wrong thing.
Yeah, well, and, you know, and here's my thing, because I've always struggled. I was doing some study on cities and JP Morgan, and then it was right as I was reading about New York and JP Morgan centralization and literally physical segregation of power. And the JP Morgan guy came out and was like, Bitcoin's a scam, blah, blah, blah. And
You bet he said.
I started looking at JP Morgan himself. I'm like, of course, the king of centralization and all those kind of, and then I went, you know what? These guys solve the problems of the day with the tools that they had in hand. Yeah. And on some levels, yeah, we can look back and say they're all evil, blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, they did like solve problems. Like we wouldn't have these massive pieces of infrastructure that did great things, you know, had they not centralized certain things. But now as humanity and power goes in and out, now we're in a decentralized phase. So where we aggregated power in centralized areas like capital cities and things like that, now we're going to be able to break it down. And, you know, our devices are the things that are going to chip away at these stacks of power that exist around the world.
Yeah. And there's actually, it's an interesting thing to look at. And I can't remember the name of this woman, but she's a biological scientist, and she talks about the maturity of ecological systems. And she says, this is actually a maturity process. That there's nothing wrong with a hierarchical system. And when you see a new organism start to develop, it starts to develop very competitive. That's what mutation is about, right? It's a dog eat dog, the best mutation wins. But as ecologies develop into the next stage, at first they're very confrontational and very power oriented, but there becomes a point at which competition becomes too expensive in resources. Mm-hmm. And then if you keep, right, and then you get parasites and you get things where it's actually an ecology where one thing breathes what the other thing, you know, like one thing inhales where the other thing exhales. It's like, I can't compete with everybody for the oxygen here. I better be right. And so, and it's like, and then, one thing uses fertilizer that the other thing excretes. Right. And that's where humanity kind of is. So it's not that the last system was bad. It was a natural evolution of how organisms evolve. They start with this very competitive system. And when the cost of competition becomes so high that they need to evolve, which is where we are right now, because we're killing each other. We have like an autoimmune disease. Right? Like some of the cells in our humanity are killing the other cells in our humanity. They're like, it's the enemy. It's like, no, that's one of our cells. It's the enemy. It's a different color. It's cancerous. Let's kill it, right? It's like an autoimmune disease. And we're all starting to recognize that today, that it's really getting very expensive to treat each other in a competitive way.
Even the fact that business is in a zero-sum competition with the environment. Yeah. You know, our national leadership says, hey, we'll leave some of it because we need economic development. And you're like, whoa, that's not zero sum, you know. And I like this idea that we've now syncopated with code. We've syncopated the people, planet, profit concepts. And like you said, created this ecosystem as opposed to a dominating system one over the other. Oh, man. Man, I feel smarter than an hour ago. And, and you really
we can go on.
Yeah, read the books, write a review.
No, I absolutely am. Because when we started this thing, Trent and I remember one of the conclusions we came to is we said, hey, we want to build a system where we know we've created a true meritocracy when some girl in India writes a code that takes over our company. And when that happens, we'll high five each other and say, hey man, we did it. That was it. Like some kid took our company, and now we can fight to get it back. And fighting to get it back means creating more green energy for more people on the planet, and that's a good kind of like cooperation. What do they call? I can never say that.
I don't know. I would just get the ukulele and send it to the banana tree.
Exactly. At that point, that's what I'm hoping for. Somebody else that we don't even know that wasn't in the organization takes it over. Because the idea is, and what we're trying to proliferate is say, hey, just like Uber's the biggest taxi company on the planet that has no taxis. We want to be the biggest employer in the planet without any real employees. Just that every time. And everybody, around the world is working for us by doing these behaviors that benefit everybody. But once again, we don't have end of the year proposals or evaluations for everybody using a toilet that's creating, renewable energy from their waste or things like that. Yeah. So that's where I envision.
Leadership becomes fluid. Right? There's no.
And that's that point. Yeah, somebody can take it, and that goes. In 2008, that's one of the things we learned. This quiet culture of nobody talks about salaries, and then the statistics come out in 2008 and it's like people at the bottom going, oh, what are you making? And then that's where, the information started equalizing it. So I hear you.
I mean, I had that, with my company, with the white paper writing company, right? And kind of like, and I've got these guys and I'm paying them and whatever. And I've got a price list and different people in different parts of the world. And they asked me for different salaries. And there was just this moment where I'm like, I'm answering 5 emails a day with my price list. Like, how long before my guys know how much I'm taking? And how much before they ask each other? I'm like, this is crazy. It has to be totally transparent. Because it just, it just became so like, I had this worry all the time. What if they find out how much I have?
How can I hide it? How can I hide it better? That's the old way of doing things, huh?
And it takes away that stress, which reduces your cortisol levels. Like you start looking, once again, like talking about measurables within your body. And then you say, okay, you know what? My idea is to get rid of my stress. So the transparency is going to help me get to that end state of happiness. We're not worried about people doing math.
It frees up space for doing something really, really meaningful, something which creates value, because anything which is defensive is not creating value.
Yeah.
And then, and then you get interesting things. So we have this, we have these team meetings and I'm like, guys, I'm spending too much time editing your stuff. And so one of the people says, well, what do you mean? And then the other person says, how about we edit each other's stuff? You pay us a little bit more and you have less stress. Right. It's like, oh, okay. Right. And then everybody's happy because most of them don't need to be doing this. They have other jobs and stuff, but they're learning more, and now they get to learn double because they could edit each other's stuff, and everybody gets happier.
And you've created a solution that wasn't there before.
Yeah,
that's the outcome, and that's where that's a good example of all these ideas that we've talked about, and then it just comes out like stuff's just easier. People feel like they're getting fair play. They understand the rules in which they're going. The bosses feel better. The work gets done better, faster, more efficient. Bam. That's where we're heading.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Well, I feel like the biggest thing that we didn't talk about was communication, which is really the foundation underneath everything. And so I'm just going to sort of briefly say about that, and if you want to ask. But our communication method, first of all, we start with the 10 Commandments, right? And the first thing it says in the Bible is that God said, let there be light. And there was light. And as human beings, that is how we create. We say things, we say, I'm a Jew. And then we are. We'll say, I'll marry you. And then we do. We actually create. And our opinions, we consider those part of our identity. I'm a member of the whatever. And I believe this. And then when somebody says another thing that doesn't align with that, they're over there, they're that. They're them. And then if we're in a DAO and it's like, I am the best blockchain coder. Now, if my code wasn't accepted, or if you don't think that we should fork, or you don't think that we should, what do you mean we should work on scalability? We need to work on whatever, right? We treat that like our identity, and we communicate as if that's a threat to our humanness or ourselves or our person when somebody disagrees with us, right? And that's the fundamental shift that really has to happen underneath all these things we've been talking about. Because we have to stop seeing this as, if you have a different opinion than me, you're a red and I'm a blue, and you guys live in the United States. And you've seen the extremism of what happens when you think somebody's a red and you're a blue. It's like the most ridiculously absurd thing in the entire universe. And it's been created by a hierarchical system. I mean, can you imagine if politicians were just like, yeah, everybody should have enough to eat and healthcare. And you know what, we agree about 80-90% of the stuff with the Republicans. And there's only that like little 10% where we disagree. Then how would you possibly vote?
No, yeah, and you
right?
talk about ego-outcome dynamics,
right?
Which we learned a lot about coming out of the Second World War, where a lot of people were like, "Hold on, how did these church pew sitting Germans just try to kill everybody twice?"
Yeah.
And then it's just kind of, oh yeah, and then it just, and so this realm of psychology comes out and saying, oh, like how does in-group, out-group see? And yeah, there's this this identity that we have, and anybody that challenges that identity for survivability purposes, we put them in that other group, and then it's easier to then hurt them.
Yeah.
And so that's where we could break it down. And yeah, one of the things, a theme of my writing is coming out is saying that we're going to have a different identity because of the blockchain. It's not going to go up to that central capital because that capital was built to kind of protect our commerce. And so we're going to have less identity to these capital cities and probably more localized identity. So,
well, it'll be community
Absolutely.
identity. Because we belong to multiple communities. So we think of ourselves as the blockchain community. I talk about that as if we're something, like as if we exist. We're the blockchain community. And you go to a blockchain event and there is a feeling of community, and people are, a certain way. And some people, like they're at that event and you're like, yeah, they're just, they're just investors. Right. And right. They're not one of us. That's a different community, right? And you might belong to the rollerblading community or the Aikido community or the whatever. So we will have local communities and local affiliations, but we'll also have, whatever, LGBT.
Functional communities.
Yeah, community.
Yes, functional. Yeah. Absolutely.
And those communities all have behavioral aspects to them. So, but the fundamental thing has to be to recognize that all of those communities are religion. Like if I'm a vegan and you eat dairy, that's your religion, and we don't have to worry. Like, it doesn't threaten me that you eat dairy. And that's what has to change about our communication underneath all of this for us to start functioning as an ecosystem.
Great. Yeah, and it's going to be computer aided. So there's that, once again, that third party neutrality of code that comes in and helps, humans accept that common ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
So. Well, and what's the book's name again? Let's put it. I don't know if we said it.
It's called "So You've Got a DAO."
Got a DAO.
So you've got a DAO. Yeah, because I think we were all there, right? We all understand that we thought that raising the money was the hard part.
Oh yeah, and then now it started.
That's the idea. That's the idea behind. It's like, yeah. Now you have $40 million on your account. Great, and now make it happen.
Now you gotta herd cats.
Yeah. No. And, a philosopher said once, "More money, more problems."
Yeah. Are you sure that wasn't a rapper?
Yeah, well, these are philosophers.
They're different problems. And that's why, again, we started looking, okay, now, because one of the things we've done is kind of as a community, at least up till now, right? It's going to change, but is we solved the problem of fundraising. That's temporary. But now the problem is growing a company, and that hasn't changed at all. In fact, that has changed for the harder, right? Because like as Marco said, you can't tell people what to do.
I think most of us here are startup guys. So like bootstrapping a company, it has something good. It keeps you very focused. Huh? So you know what you have to do. And if you don't do it, you will never be successful. So running for money is important, and bootstrapping focus is important. You're losing focus if you have too much money. So you have a challenge. All this, for me, all these ICO companies who really want to go for it, they have a challenge. They have too much money at their disposal at one moment in time. So they have to be very, very focused on their communications, on their alignment, on their mindset. Because if they're not, then they will just throw the money out for whatever they want to do, but they're not focusing on the product. They're not focusing on the solution they want to bring. And that's why it's so important that we not only think about technology.
Yeah. So these investors should be looking at the use of a DAO as an indicator of somebody who understands, hey, we're about to get bombarded, or, you know, we have things on our hands that we're going to have to lead a lot of this code and a lot of this process to a decentralized autonomous organization. And that's how I know my money in this app is going to be around in 20 years, because it's not people making decisions. You know,
that's why you have these advisors and so on. But we all know what is with these advisors and ICOs. They get their tokens, and most of them are out the day after that's done. And most likely, if they didn't get Ether, they will not get much out of it. So what we had a discussion, actually not later than this noon, I had lunch with somebody who runs a platform, a technical platform to set up ICOs. And he says, well, that's what we need, because we want them to be successful. So we need the DAO leadership. We need you to help them to become successful. So there's a real need now felt in the industry that it's not enough to raise the money.
Yeah.
And
I think the other thing that is a really important message to people who are, you know, great coders, and they might be like, well, you know, I'm not the greatest communicator. And we don't say this enough. It's just training. You can train yourself to be a better communicator. You can get training programs to be a better manager, a better leader. You can get training programs to get along with people better. I mean, I was the most abrasive person.
No.
And I didn't know that you could just go to a course and learn how to communicate properly. That was like, you know, like there was a taboo on that. Like, oh, are you messed up? You know, you need one of those. And so I think that's also part of what we're saying, and the reason we're targeting the community, because there is self-help stuff out there. And, you know, we kind of want to say it's just training. It's not like self-help, it's training, and anyone can get this training. You don't have to be a natural born leader. You don't have to be a natural born communicator. You can learn, just like you learn programming. And I think that's a really, whether it's with us or with somebody else, I think it's a really important message to get out there. You can learn these skills. They're just like any other skill. It's not like some people are natural born communicators. I'm not.
And that's where the code, because when you were talking earlier about how the code creates the leadership and, you know, conditions for leadership, something like, oh man, you're taking away a lot of power from tall people and good looking people, because they get a lot of reputation because of those physical attributes that now it's going to come down to if you can perform under these conditions. And it's not always the tallest or the most handsome person that's going to be able to do that. So.
I love how you said person, because you may notice something about the people in the room, because I'm not a dude.
Right? Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you've suffered from that too, where this can
yes.
be useful. No,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's right.
I've got to add, I went through something very similar, you know, after I sold my last startup. I was like, do I go learn a new programming language? Do I, you know, what's the next evolution for me as, you know, as a person, as, you know, as someone who's now sold a startup and been through that experience. And I actually decided that the language I needed to focus on was actually English. And I needed to focus on my writing skills. I needed to focus on my communication skills. I needed to focus on the psychology of the words that I was using. You know, I also, you know, I admit I studied a little bit of Edward Bernays and propaganda, and, you know, some of the psychology of persuasion, and some of these other techniques, because ultimately those are things that I can use to accomplish my goals. You know, and unfortunately there are these kind of innate things within how humans communicate that we have these triggers. You know, reciprocation, you know, is a really big one. You know, social proof is another one. So all these little things that you can use as leverage points to get what you want. And as long as you're, you can use these things for evil, but you can also use these tools with integrity and use them honestly, and accomplish your goals and get things done the right way as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
you're right. The best investment is always the investment in yourself. And, Marco and I, although we have a very specific perspective, we aren't the leaders in self-help. We do recommend all those other, whether it's, Tony Robbins or Landmark or Brené Brown, we think they're all great. I mean, we just, and some of their methodologies are incredibly fast, like 3-4 days, and you really have, a brain upgrade. And so we really think this is a huge, investment for everybody in themselves. And it's not just about, buy our book. There's just so many resources out there today. And a lot of it's based on brain science and neuroscience that we didn't know 20 years ago. We didn't know 30 years ago how to change ourselves so quickly. And the medical science would have you take a pill. But really, these methodologies are so much more effective for people and their happiness and their communication skills. So I really do recommend, like I said, upgrade your skills, and just look at those things, whether it's, whatever it is.
Actually, read the book and read all the books we're talking about.
Yeah, we have a whole reference section in the back. We refer to these people because,
then it's just what we are passionate about: distributed autonomous organizations. That's why we do what we do. But all this, it's always the same message. It's just about how it is catered, from what angle you are taking it from.
Yeah.
And so we're just catering the angle for the DAO. That's the only thing.
Well, thanks, guys. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Where can people find you? What's the best way to get in touch and find your book and your website?
Yeah.
So
DAOleadership.com. No, you say it again now, Marco. I'm sorry.
DAOleadership.com. Yeah, Marco or Grace at DAOleadership.com.
Yeah.
For an email. So yeah.
And we're very public people. I don't know about Marco, but I know about myself. There's like only one person that spells their name that way. So Googling me pretty much works.
Yeah.
Without Rahmani with a Y.
Yep.
Okay.
That has to do with my ex-husband's English teacher.
Nice.
Okay.
That's how it happened. His brother spells it differently. Like, it's very funny.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's funny. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thanks, guys. We appreciate you coming on to this show. This has been enlightening, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Really great. Thank you.